The little girl stepped out of the tree line at 8:14 p.m., looked straight at me through a curtain of pine branches, and said, "Dad?" Nobody in my search line moved for a second. We'd been out there for almost 4 hours looking for a missing child from a foster home off County Road 12. Female, about 10 years old, yellow raincoat, last seen before lunch near the back fence line where the property broke into state forest. We'd covered creek beds, drainage cuts, old logging trails, and enough brush to leave everybody bleeding through their gloves. Then she walked out like she'd only been standing there waiting for the right person to show up. Her coat was muddy to the elbows, one sneaker lace dragged loose. There was dried blood under one nostril and burrs caught in her hair. But she wasn't crying. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't even looking at the deputies or the EMT coming up beside me. Just me. "Dad," she said again, quieter this time, like she was correcting a mistake I was making by not answering fast enough. "I'm 52 years old. I've worked search and rescue in Ashe County for 21 years. I've found people dead, alive, hypothermic, drunk, concussed, bitten, abandoned, and once halfway feral after 6 days in winter brush. I know what shock looks like. I know how trauma can fasten onto the nearest safe shape and call it whatever it needs. Still, when that girl looked at me, I felt something cold move through my chest. My deputy medic, Alvarez, knelt first. "Hey there, sweetheart. I'm Jen. We're gonna get you warmed up, okay?" The girl didn't look at her. She took 3 small steps toward me and stopped close enough that I could smell wet leaves on her coat. Then she said, with calm little girl certainty, "You came back." The men behind me shifted, radios hissed. Somewhere down the line, one of the volunteers muttered, "Jesus." I said the only true thing I had. "Honey, I think you've got me mixed up with somebody else." Her face changed. Not confusion, not disappointment, something worse. A kind of tired hurt, like she'd already expected that from me and was trying not to make it harder. "No," she said. "You just do that sometimes." Alvarez gave me a quick look that said, "Play along." So I crouched. "What's your name?" "Hannah." "Okay, Hannah. I'm Dan Mercer. We're here to help you." "I know your name," she said. The way she said it made the back of my neck prickle. Alvarez got the thermal blanket around her. Hannah let her. But when Alvarez tried to guide her towards the trailhead, the child grabbed my wrist with both hands and held on hard enough that I felt the tremor in her fingers. "Don't let them put me in the white room," she said. "There is no white room," Alvarez told her gently. Hannah kept her eyes on me. "You said that last time?" I wish I could tell you I laughed it off, called it stress, told myself she'd latched onto the oldest man in a county jacket and built a story around me because children do that when the world stops making sense. I did tell myself all of that. What I couldn't explain was why, when I took her hand to steady her over the roots, her grip on mine felt familiar. Not emotionally, not in some soft hallmark way, mechanically, like a motion my body had done before. By the time we got her back to the command post behind the foster house, everybody had heard the story. Searches are like that. You can run a disciplined operation for half a day, but let one impossible thing happen and it'll move through the whole perimeter faster than weather. Deputy Hensley met us by the floodlight tower. "This her?" "This is her," Alvarez said. Hensley crouched a little to be less intimidating. "Hey, Hannah, I'm Deputy Hensley. We're just going to ask you a few questions." Hannah stood tucked against my side under the blanket, like I was the one person in that whole yard who belonged in the picture. "Can you tell me why you left the house?" Hensley asked. "Because the lady in the kitchen kept saying I'd get used to it." "What lady?" "The one with the pink nails." "That's Ms. Rourke," Hensley said. "Your foster mother." Hannah didn't answer. Hensley glanced at me. "Do you know where you are right now?" "In the back field." "That's right. And do you know who he is?" He jerked his chin toward me. Hannah frowned like the question itself was stupid. "My dad." A couple of the volunteers turned away. I could feel the shift in the yard without looking. The subtle human rearranging that happens when a scene decides what it is before the facts do. Men who'd been treating me like incident command started treating me like family. Not openly, just in their posture, their restraint, the carefulness. I stepped back, and Hannah's hand tightened painfully. "Honey, I'm not your father." She looked up at me, and for the first time there was fear in her face. "Don't say that here." Something in how she said it made my mouth go dry. Alvarez led her to the medic table for a basic exam. I stayed because she wouldn't let me leave. Every time I took more than 3 steps, her breathing changed. She'd go rigid and start scanning the dark around us like something might come through it if she lost sight of me. Alvarez checked pupils, pulse, temperature, dehydration, mild exposure, minor cuts, no obvious head trauma. She looked under the mud and scratches like a child who'd spent one night rough, and maybe more than one in fear. Then Alvarez reached for Hannah's chin to check the bruise under it, and Hannah jerked away from her hand so fast she nearly toppled off the folding chair. I moved without thinking and steadied her. Just that. One hand to her shoulder. She dropped against me at once and buried her face in my jacket like she knew exactly where she fit there. The whole command post went quiet around us. I heard Hensley clear his throat. Alvarez pretended to focus on her med kit. "Hannah," I said, because I didn't know what else to say. Muffled against me, she said, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For taking so long." That should not have affected me, but it did, because the apology sounded practiced, like part of a conversation that had happened before. They moved us into the county SUV, mostly to get Hannah out of the yard and away from the foster parents, who were standing under the porch light, looking as shaken as everybody else. I sat in back beside her because she would not release my hand. Hensley drove. Alvarez rode shotgun. Hensley kept his tone neutral. "Hannah, do you know your last name?" She stared out the rain-streaked window for a while before answering. "Mercer." Nobody said anything. Hensley tried again. "What was that, sweetheart?" "Mercer," she repeated, like his. Alvarez turned halfway in her seat. "Who told you that?" Hannah looked at her like she'd asked who told her what color the sky was. "Nobody." I said, "That is not your last name." She turned to me. Her expression didn't look angry. It looked wounded in a way that made me feel immediately ashamed, though I had no idea why. "You said I didn't have to use the other one if I didn't want to." I sat there, with the dull county radio crackling up front, and my own pulse starting to sound too loud in my ears. "I've been married 23 years. My wife's name is Karen. We've got one grown son in Tennessee. I have never had a daughter, legally or otherwise. Never fostered, never adopted, never signed up for emergency placement. My work has crossed paths with plenty of children in bad situations, but always as responder, not parent. And still, Sitting in the back of that SUV, I had the ugly sensation that I was about to be caught in a lie I hadn't told. At the annex, they put Hannah in interview room 2, because it was the smallest and least threatening. Miriam Pike came in from social services 20 minutes later, hair still damp from a late shower, cardigan over scrubs, carrying the look people in her line of work wear when they already know the night is going to be longer than it should be. Miriam's good, calm voice, no nonsense, doesn't condescend to kids. She walked in, saw Hannah sitting right beside me on the bench with the thermal blanket still wrapped around both our shoulders, and stopped for half a beat. Then she recovered. "Hi, Hannah. I'm Miriam." Hannah looked past her toward the hall. "Karen here?" That got all of us. Miriam kept her voice steady. "Who's Karen?" "My mom," I said before I could stop myself. "No." Hannah flinched. The room went dead. That was the first real damage. Not the confusion, not the oddity, the damage. The moment I heard myself denying her with the tone you'd use to correct a dangerous lie, and watched that land on a little girl who had spent the last hour acting like I was the only fixed thing left in the world. Miriam saw it too. She turned a page in her notepad and said, very gently, "Hannah, can you tell me where you've been staying?" "At the yellow house. Before that." "With the lady that smelled like powder." "Before that." Hannah looked down at her hands. Miriam tried another angle. "Do you know how old you are?" 10. That matched. "Do you know your birthday?" She gave a date. Miriam wrote it down. Hensley, standing by the mirror, quietly shook his head. Didn't match any paperwork from the foster home. Then Miriam asked, "What is your father's name?" Hannah rested her cheek against my arm like she was tired. "Dan." Miriam looked at me. I felt heat creep up my neck. "This is absurd," Hannah said, without lifting her head. "You don't like when people use Daniel." That small private detail hit harder than the name had. I don't go by Daniel. Haven't since high school. People who know me know better. Strangers don't guess it, because Dan is printed on every county badge, an SAR roster I've worn for 2 decades. Miriam asked, "How do you know that, Hannah?" "Because he gets quiet first." I stood up too fast and nearly knocked the chair over. "I need a minute." In the hall, Hensley followed me to the vending machines. "You okay?" "No." He leaned against the wall and folded his arms. Hensley's not a stupid man. 20 years in county law will sand the romantic nonsense right out of you. "Trauma, kid," he said. "Attachment behavior. She saw your jacket, heard your name in the woods. Maybe somebody at the foster place mentioned you were leading search. That doesn't explain Karen." No. It didn't explain what Hannah had whispered while Alvarez was cleaning the cut on her palm, either. I hadn't told anybody that part. When Alvarez uncapped the antiseptic, Hannah looked at me and said, "Don't tell Karen I got blood on the dish towel." I said, "What dish towel?" "The one under the sink, the striped one. She keeps it there because you spill coffee." Then she winced when the antiseptic touched skin and started crying in small, silent tears, and I didn't push. "Now, in the hall," I told Hensley. He listened without interrupting, then rubbed at his jaw. "Maybe she was in your house sometime." "No." "You sure?" "Jesus, Hensley." He held up both hands. "I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm saying kids turn up in weird channels. Church drives, school events, community stuff. Maybe she's seen your wife somewhere." "My wife doesn't keep dish towels under the sink," I said. He frowned. Then my phone rang. Karen. I answered on the first buzz. You still out? At the annex. Everything okay? I almost lied. Then I said, no. There was a pause. Dan? There's a girl here from the search. She keeps saying I'm her father. I expected a laugh, or a curse, or confusion. What I got was silence, so complete I checked the screen to make sure the call was still live. Then Karen said, carefully, what's her name? Hannah. Another silence. Karen? I'm here. You know a Hannah? No, she said too quickly, then slower. I don't think so. That phrasing mattered. I know my wife's voice. I know the difference between certainty, anger, irritation, and fear. This wasn't any of them cleanly. It sounded like she was feeling her way over loose boards in the dark. She said your name, I told her. How would she know me? I don't know. Karen took a breath. What does she look like? 10, brown hair, thin, yellow raincoat. The line crackled. Then Karen said, in a voice so faint I almost missed it, that's not possible. What isn't? But she was already covering. Nothing. I mean, how would I know? Do you want me to come down there? I should have said no. Should have kept my home separate from that room until I had facts. Instead, I said, maybe. When I went back in, Miriam had crayons on the table. Hannah was drawing. Kids draw under stress. Houses, trees, their families, often with missing parts bigger than they should be. It's not a magic window. It's just useful sometimes. I stood in the doorway and looked over her shoulder. She had drawn a kitchen. Not a generic kitchen. Mine. The long, narrow one in my house with the double sink under the window, and Karen's herb shelf in the left corner, and the old dent in the refrigerator door from when our son hit it with a baseball at 12. She drew the sink wrong, though. She put a purple cup on the drying mat by the faucet. My son used to use a purple cup when he was little. Cheap plastic thing from a county fair. We hadn't had it in the house in 15 years. I heard myself say, "Where did you see that?" Hannah looked up. Miriam kept her face neutral, but I saw her glance at the drawing. "The purple one was mine," Hannah said. I didn't say anything. She touched the crayon to the page again and added a little sun in the window. Colored it purple, too. Then, without looking at me, she said, "You told me that was okay, because I saw heat different." I felt something move in my head. Not a thought, not a memory, more like pressure behind a wall. Miriam said softly, "Dan, sit down." I didn't. An hour later, Karen arrived. She came in wearing jeans, boots, and the denim jacket she throws on when she doesn't want to look as worried as she is. For 1 second, seeing her in the annex hallway made everything feel normal, like there was still a version of the night where she'd step into that room, smile at the kid, and we'd all realize the explanation was obvious and boring. Karen saw Hannah through the interview window and stopped walking. The color left her face in a clean rush. I said, "Karen." She didn't answer. Hannah looked up from the bench. She'd been half asleep against my side. The second she saw Karen, she sat straight. "Mom." Karen made a sound I'd never heard out of her. Not quite a gasp, more like a choke. Miriam opened the door before anybody could decide whether that was wise. Karen stepped in slowly, eyes fixed on the girl. Hannah smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just relief. "You cut your hair." Karen put a hand to her own head without seeming aware of it. She had cut it short 3 weeks ago. "Nobody told her that," I said. Karen still wasn't looking at me. Hannah patted the bench beside her, simple as could be. "You can sit. Dad gets weird when everybody stands over me." Karen looked at me then. What passed between us in that glance is hard to explain, because there wasn't one emotion in it. It was fear, yes, but also recognition, not of the child exactly, of pressure, of something in the room trying to settle into place around the three of us and asking how much resistance we had left. Karen sat down. Hannah leaned against her without hesitation. My wife froze for one full second, then very slowly, her hand came up and rested on the girl's shoulder. Not because she believed it, because she couldn't make herself do anything else. Miriam ended the interview after that. Hannah was exhausted. County policy meant we had to place her somewhere safe for the night. But every option on paper triggered one problem after another in practice. She wouldn't go back to the foster house. Alvarez worried about her bolting again if we moved too fast. Karen looked like if anyone tried to physically separate the child from us in front of her, she might break in some permanent way. So Miriam arranged for Hannah to sleep in the family room beside her office on the second floor. Small couch, locked hall, staff on rotation, temporary. Hannah accepted all of that with strange calm, so long as I promised I'd still be there in the morning. "Promise," she said, holding my sleeve. "I'll be here, no matter what they say." I looked at Miriam, then back at Hannah. "I'll be here." She studied my face like she was checking for weakness. Then she nodded and let go. Karen and I went home just after midnight. We didn't talk in the truck. At home, she stood in the kitchen, not taking off her jacket, staring at the sink like she expected it to confess something. I said, "You know her?" Karen said, "I know that little coat." I waited. She shook her head hard once. "No, that's not right. I don't know her. But I know that coat. Or I know one like it. I keep seeing mud on the tile by the back door. We never had a kid in this house." I know. The terrible part was how much effort it took her to say it. She opened the hall closet, stared inside for a long time, then reached to the top shelf behind the spare blankets. When she pulled her hand back, she was holding a cedar box I had never seen before in my life. My blood went cold. Karen set it on the table and looked at me like maybe I'd explain it. I couldn't. Inside were 3 hair ribbons, a child's sock, 2 crayons melted together, and a folded piece of paper covered in sun-faded marker. A drawing. Me, or somebody enough like me. There was no point lying, standing between a woman with short hair and a little girl in a yellow coat. Underneath, in clumsy block letters, "Mom, Dad, Hannah." Karen sat down hard. "I don't remember this," she whispered. Neither did I. But when I touched the paper, I had that same nauseating physical recognition I'd had in the woods. Not memory, occupancy, as if my hand had been there before. On the back of the drawing, in my own handwriting, were 4 words. "Purple sun is okay." I slept maybe 40 minutes total. At 6, I was back at the annex. Miriam met me in the hall looking worse than I felt. She asked for pancakes. I blinked at her. Miriam gave a humorless little shrug. That's a good sign in children. Appetite. "Is she okay?" She slept. Miriam hesitated. "Dan, I made some calls." Something in her tone tightened my chest. "There was a fire in North Creek 8 years ago," she said. "You were there as volunteer SAR support during evacuation intake at the Baptist church." "I've been at 100 fires. This one involved several displaced children, one unidentified girl. temporary holding while kin were located. Miriam held up a photocopy. The intake form lists a Daniel Mercer as emergency claiming adult. I stared at the page. The signature was mine. No question, same ugly loop on the M I've had forever. Under relationship, one word was written in blue ink: father. I heard the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. That's wrong. Miriam said nothing. I took the page from her. Date, my name, my phone number from 8 years ago. Hannah, listed only as female juvenile, no confirmed surname. Smoke exposure, night terrors, refuses transfer unless accompanied by father. My knees felt loose. That's not possible. It happened during evacuation overflow, Miriam said. Church volunteers were doing informal intakes before county triage caught up. Paperwork was messy. Maybe somebody wrote it in just a speed treatment. But we both knew what the signature meant. Whatever the reason, I had signed it, and the consequence was immediate. Not abstract, not theoretical. If my name had ever gone on a line like that, then everybody in that building, nurses, church ladies, deputies, volunteers, would have treated me as her father at least for a while. Spoken to me that way, referred to me that way, built a temporary social reality around us that a child could climb inside and never leave. Where is the rest of the file? That's the problem, Miriam said. There isn't one, or not a formal one, but there is a box of overflow church records they never transferred after the fire. Pastor let me look through it this morning. She handed me a photograph. Church basement, cots, coffee urn, volunteers in smoke-stained clothes, and me. Younger, heavier, kneeling beside a little girl wrapped in a blanket, yellow raincoat balled up under her arm, and Hannah. I don't remember making the sound that came out of me, but Miriam stepped closer like she thought I might fall. A memory pushed at the edges then, not clear, just fragments. Church coffee burned on a hot plate, chlorine from mopped floors, a child sitting cross-legged on a cot refusing to let a nurse touch her. My own voice saying, "It's all right, honey. I'm right here." Though I could not have told you until that second whether I'd ever said those words to any child in my life. She was real then, I said. Miriam nodded. Not the right reaction, maybe, but the one I had. Relief, terror, shame. They all came mixed. Karen arrived half an hour later, and when I showed her the photo, she put her hand over her mouth and started crying without warning. "I was there," she said. I looked at her. We brought clothes, bottled water. I remember the basement. She was shaking now. "I remember a little girl who wouldn't let go of you." "You didn't remember her last night?" "I didn't," Karen said, furious at herself. "I remember it now." That was the second major damage, not the photo, Karen remembering. Because once she did, more came with it, not all at once. In grim little pieces, an asthma inhaler she used to look for in the junk drawer because the child keeps taking it apart, though Hannah never had asthma. A yellow coat hanging to dry over our bathtub. Me asleep in the recliner with a small weight against my chest. Karen in the guest room doorway saying, "Dan, this can't be temporary if you keep acting like this." The sentence hit me like a blow. I remembered that one, too. Not the whole scene, just the emotional shape of it. Karen was angry because she was scared, and I was defensive because she'd spoken aloud something I did not want named. Miriam told us what she'd pieced together from the church box, and one retired caseworker she reached by phone. During the North Creek fire, Hannah had been separated from whoever brought her out. No confirmed family, no ID that held. She attached to me almost immediately. I was there all 3 nights of intake overflow. On the second night, when a nurse needed consent for stitches and no guardian could be found, I signed the paper because somebody told me they needed a line filled. After the fire, because I was the only adult she would reliably sleep near, Miriam's predecessor asked if Karen and I could keep Hannah for a few days while kin verification sorted out. We said yes, not officially, not through the state, a church arrangement. Short-term, human, sloppy. 11 days. 11 days, Hannah lived in my house. I remembered almost none of them. Karen remembered more, and what she remembered hurt. She followed you everywhere, she said quietly, not looking at me. Bathroom door, garage, yard. If you left for work, she'd sit by the window. I said, "Why don't I remember that?" Karen gave me a look that was not unkind. Because grief can erase what it can't survive. We'd lost a pregnancy that spring. That part I don't hide. I don't talk about it much, but I don't hide it. Karen took it harder. I took it quieter, which isn't the same as taking it well. Then the fire happened, and a little girl with no fixed name slept in our spare room for 11 days. And somewhere inside those 11 days, some part of me stepped into fatherhood so fast, it scared my wife. When County finally located a maternal aunt in Wilkes, Karen wanted to fight the transfer. I said no. We weren't equipped. We weren't approved. It wasn't ours to keep. The aunt picked Hannah up from the church office. 3 weeks later, the aunt disappeared with her. Case went cold, and we never spoke about Hannah again. That was the hidden truth. No government program, no secret facility, no curse in the woods. Just a frightened child who attached to the wrong man at the exact right moment. A damaged couple who let themselves become a family for 11 days, and a system sloppy enough to put father on paper because it was easier than uncertainty. So why had she called me Dad in the woods? Because I had been. Not legally, not permanently, but enough. And the real horror was that I had chosen, at some point after she vanished, to live like those 11 days had never happened. Hannah sat with us in Miriam's office that afternoon, while the foster coordinator and sheriff argued behind closed doors about next steps. She listened without interrupting, hands folded in her lap, expression older than any 10-year-old ought to wear. When the arguing stopped, she looked at me and said, "You remember now?" I nodded. "Some." "That's enough," she said. I asked the question that had been waiting in me since the woods. "Why did you leave the foster house?" She looked at Karen first, then back to me. "Because they kept saying I should call somebody else Mom and Dad." Karen made a small sound. Hannah kept going. "They wanted me to meet a couple from Boone, nice house, nice dog. They talked soft the whole time." Her fingers picked at the seam of the blanket around her knees. "The lady said I was lucky I was still young enough to start over." She said the phrase with flat, adult contempt, the kind you only hear from children who've had too many adults explain their own lives to them. "So I left," she finished. "And found the forest," I said. "I knew you'd be there." "How?" She gave me that same tired look she'd had in the woods. "Because when people lose kids around here, they call you." It was such a simple answer that it embarrassed me. Then she added, "And because you promised." I swallowed. What did I promise? That if I got scared enough, I could come back. I don't remember saying that. I remember believing it. That was the last piece I'll never be sure about, and maybe that's the part that still keeps me up. I do not know whether that promise was something I actually told her during those 11 days, or something she made out of the feeling of being safe with me, or something my own shame has built backward into memory, because it hurts less than admitting I gave her nothing. By evening, the county had a plan: temporary emergency placement, paperwork, evaluation, all the slow machinery of doing things properly after years of doing them badly. Hannah sat in the chair by the window and listened while adults discussed her like weather. Then she asked me, very quietly, "Are you going to make me leave again?" Everything in the room stopped. Karen turned to me. Miriam set her pen down, and I realized the climax of the whole thing wasn't in a box or a form or a photo. It was there, in a 10-year-old girl asking whether I was about to repeat the central injury of her life, while 3 other adults pretended procedure might soften it. I said, "No." The word came out rough. I looked at Miriam. Whatever the papers say, whatever it takes, I'm not handing her off because it's easier. Karen started crying again, but this time she didn't hide it. I went on because I needed the whole truth said out loud, maybe for the first time. I was there. I signed the paper. I brought her home. And when it got hard, I let the county tell me she belonged somewhere else because I was scared of what it meant if she didn't. I looked at Hannah. I don't know what I can legally be to you by tomorrow morning, but I know I'm not doing that twice. Hannah didn't run to me, didn't smile, didn't give me some neat movie ending. She just watched my face a long time, checking for weakness the way she had the night before. Then she nodded once. "All right," she said. That was harder to bear than tears would have been. The paperwork took weeks. That part isn't scary in a story, but it's where real life does its damage. Statements, emergency review, placement hearings. The old case reopened just long enough to establish how thoroughly it had failed her. Karen and I took parenting classes designed for people with far less history than we had. We answered questions from young caseworkers who kept calling our connection to Hannah unusual, as if there were a normal version of any of it. At home, Karen cleared the spare room. When she peeled back the blue paint on one section of trim to fix a chip, there were pencil marks underneath, height marks, tiny dates beside them, no names. Karen stood there with the scraper in her hand and looked at me. I said, "Do you remember doing that?" She said, "No." We painted over nothing. That's the lingering part, if you want one. Not some giant mystery, just little places where the line between forgotten and rewritten never settled clean. A cup we both remembered buying for Hannah, though neither of us could find a receipt. A lullaby Karen knew by the second week of Hannah living with us again, though she insisted she'd never sung it before. A sentence Hannah would say that I could finish before she did, not because I was learning her, but because some buried part of me already had. Most of it, though, I understand. This is the explanation I've landed on, and it's ugly because it doesn't require any ghosts. People can contaminate identity just by needing things too badly. A scared child needs a father. A grieving man needs the chance to be one. A tired county system needs a line on a form filled in, so treatment can move forward and everyone can go home. A church full of displaced families needs one less unresolved question. Put all that pressure in one room, and temporary starts hardening into true, whether anyone means for it to or not. Then time does what shame always hopes it will do. It buries the unbearable parts, not because they're gone, because living with them every day would cost too much. That's what happened to me. I did not forget Hannah because she meant nothing. I forgot because she meant enough to wreck the life I had. The emotional resolution, if there is one, happened on a Tuesday night, 6 weeks after she came out of the woods. Karen had made spaghetti. Hannah complained about mushrooms like she'd been doing it forever. I was at the sink rinsing plates when she came up beside me with one of those school forms kids bring home that all looked the same. There was a line for Father. She put the paper on the counter between us and said, "What do I write?" I looked at the form for a long time. Then I wrote my name, not because blood proved it, not because some old paper once did, not because I'd solved every question cleanly, because in every way that mattered to the child standing beside me, I had already answered too late once. Horror doesn't always end when you choose the humane thing. Sometimes it just changes shape. There are nights I wake up certain I hear her small footsteps from 8 years ago in the hall outside our room, and for one ugly second, I don't know whether I'm hearing the child we have now, or the one I left to memory, because that was easier than grief. Sometimes Hannah says, "Remember?" before telling a story, and I still don't know whether she's reaching for something real or asking me to help build the version of the past she can live inside. Sometimes Karen catches me looking at the old church photo and takes it away without a word because she knows I can lose an hour inside that one image. And sometimes, when Hannah hugs me goodnight, there's a flicker in me of that first cold fear from the woods. Not fear of her, fear of how fast a life can become yours before you're brave enough to admit you wanted it. Last month, I found the original intake photocopy in the folder Miriam made for our hearing. My signature was there. My phone number was there. The word father was there in blue ink. For a long time, I had comforted myself with the idea that some nurse or volunteer must have written it in and handed me the form after the fact, that the contamination began somewhere outside me, that I was just the man nearest the blast radius. I finally held the page close enough to see the pressure marks. The whole line is in my handwriting. Relationship, father. I don't remember writing it. I don't know if I believed it when I did. I don't know if I wrote it because someone told me to, because it was easier, because she needed me to, or because some honest part of me looked at that soot-covered little girl in the church basement and answered the question before the rest of my life had a chance to object. That's the part I can't settle. Hannah is asleep down the hall as I tell you this. Karen's in bed reading. The house is quiet in the ordinary way houses get quiet when the people inside them have finally, after a long time, accepted where everyone belongs. Her yellow coat still hangs by the back door. It doesn't scare me anymore when I see it there. What scares me is this. Some nights, coming in late, I catch sight of that coat before I remember the last few months, and my first thought is not that Hannah is home. My first thought is that she made it back. And buried somewhere under everything I know now is the sick understanding that a part of me has been waiting for that sound in the woods for 8 years. The small voice out of the trees, the impossible certainty, the child I failed stepping into view and calling me Dad like she never believed I was anything else. I still don't know if she was really my daughter. I know only that when she called me that the second time, I answered.